Hello and welcome to Breathwork with Beth. I am Beth and I'm here to give you your intro. So this is very important that you watch this and that you bookmark this page because you will come back to this if you ever have any, if you just want to touch up before a journey. This is going to be very important that we not do this every single time that we go into a journey because that is going to waste hours of our time every single month, and that's not what we want. It's not what I want, and most likely that's not what any of you want. So let's expedite things here and get things moving. Sometimes these intros can go 30 minutes. That's how my breath coach does them. He's very thorough, but also very wordy. So without further ado, let's get started. So, first of all, before you come into a journey, please either only eat lightly in the 4 hours before, so more plant-based, nothing that's going to be too heavy, or just don't eat at all if you're really hungry. I have actually done this on a full stomach. I wasn't thinking about it, and I decided to do a journey, and it was totally fine, but it was a very light meal. But it was it was like a full bowl of of like nuts and seeds, sort of a no grain granola. So that is fine, apparently, which is good to know. But I wouldn't necessarily have this, I wouldn't do this after meat, in particular. Probably not a salad, actually, now that I think about it. Um, okay, so mechanics, more mechanics. Be lying down, mattress or yoga mat is fine. No children or animals, please. Preferably no interruptions. It can distress children, it can distress animals, and it can distress other people. There is a scream in this, so if there's anyone in your house who's going to be alarmed by you screaming, please let them know. And you can also scream into a pillow. Um, Speaking of pillows, don't have a pillow underneath your head. We want the airway as straight as possible so that the airway is nice and clear. And let's see. Yeah, so just a pillow for screaming, not underneath your head. So you can use, I recommend headphones all the time, over the ear. You can use earbuds. I've had people breathe these without any sort of earbud or headphones, and they've still had great experiences, but it's always best with over the ear. It's just typically much higher quality. There are higher quality earbuds, but I the over the ear just it helps with some sound protection. So if there's any noise going on in your environment, it's going to block more of that out. You can use an eye mask if you want to, but particularly if you're sleepy, I would recommend leaving the lights on, not using an eye mask, and using the floor and a yoga mat, pardon me, not your mattress, not your bed. Those things will help you keep awake. The more uncomfortable you are during these journeys, if you're sleepy, easier it is going to be to stay awake and stay engaged. So, but don't like push that. You don't need to be in pain. Okay, so brain and body chemistry. What we're doing here is we are intentionally going into fight or flight using the breath. So this actually triggers transient hypofrontality. When we go into only mouth breathing, that means that so the prefrontal cortex is turning off. That's where the inner critic lives, so to speak. And when we deprive it of oxygen by mouth breathing, just the way the nervous system works, it cuts it off to the prefrontal cortex. That means you're going to make decisions more quickly, actually. And so in fight or flight, that's actually part of the aim. So here we're not going to assess the feelings that are coming up. We get to just feel and release. We're not judging any of the feelings that come up. We're not getting lost in story. That's all inner critic business. So we're turning that off for this because we want to feel it so that we can release it and heal from it. So the brain also produces its own DMT. So if you've ever heard of microdosing on psilocybin, this is a very similar effect. And it makes a great remedy actually for depression and PTSD. I can't say that it cures anything because I'm not a doctor and this isn't necessarily approved by the FDA. But it's a very safe method. It's a very safe alternative therapy. So it produces wonderful ideas, but wonderful effects with with the DMT, with the psilocybin similarities. There is hallucinogenic effect, and people can visualize very vivid images. Some people smell things. A lot of people see just like lights, really colorful light. And some people don't see anything. I'm one of the people who doesn't actually tend to see a whole lot, but I'm very fascinated by what my clients go through, and it's really a beautiful process, just how everyone experiences it differently and how our brains interact differently in this process. So, okay. So along with like oxygen getting shut off from the prefrontal cortex, our body is getting flushed of carbon dioxide. So this can, if we do this too quickly, if we're forcing the breath out, that actually means that our body is going to tense up more. So sometimes the hands will go into what's sort of colloquially called lobster claws, but this is tetany, not to be confused with tetanus. This is not some sort of communicable disease, and it does go away. It's very temporary. It can be very uncomfortable, but usually it's just a warning sign that you need to back off from forcing the exhale. So we're doing all of the work on the inhale, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. That is an important thing to be aware of. It's just a red light, and it does tend to show up a lot more in early journeys. I had some pretty intense tetany when I got started, and now I don't have a whole lot. Actually, I don't think I've had any in months. So it does take a while to get used to not forcing the air out, especially if you've ever played a brass instrument or a reed instrument. It doesn't really matter. If you're used to forcing your air out for a specific purpose, I think it can be more challenging. I was a trombonist previously, well, and still am. So my world is okay. Be forceful with the air out. So that took a lot of getting used to for me. So one of the really cool things that this does is address cellular memory and trauma. And pardon me just a second while I reset my camera because it goes fuzzy sometimes. Okay, so there was a study done on mice with cherry blossom scent and electric shock. So they, on the first generation, they, the scientists they had the mice smell cherry blossom scent, and then they gave them electric shock. In all of the next 13 generations after that, they gave them no electric shock, but just had them smell the cherry blossom. But they had the very same reaction, just smelling the cherry blossom scent, as if they had been shocked. So it's really quite shocking. It's really interesting. So it goes 14 generations. I think it was 14 generations after the initial generation that had the actual electric shock. So I just find that absolutely fascinating, actually, even from a biblical perspective. There's a lot of uh, generational trauma, generational curses that are mentioned in the Bible. There's a lot of patterns of 14 generations in the Bible. So I think that's just a really interesting connection where science is like science and spirituality meet. And it's fascinating to me. I actually have what I think is a cellular trauma, a cellular memory about my great grandmother, one of my great grandmothers. Um, she was an immigrant from Sweden and the precursor to Ellis Island. She wasn't at Ellis Island. It was an immigration center that burned in I believe, the early 1900s, late 1800s. But she had all of her teeth pulled. It was when they believed that people carried disease in their teeth. So she had all of her teeth pulled. And I say all this, I had this, there's a lot of trauma. There's like, she had 5 children and I'm the only great grandchild. My brother and I are the only great grandchildren that are from her line. Very, very dysfunctional. just so much trauma. Those children basically just didn't survive, didn't produce families, didn't produce functional lives. Um, but when I was in college in particular, and felt out of control, I would have dreams about my teeth falling out, and it was really vivid. It was really disturbing. And this is a fairly common dream around things feeling out of control. But I actually, during that journey, I sort of had a realization of like, I wonder if it's because she was out of control. She was a bartered bride. She was a mail order bride from Sweden to Colorado, to Leadville, Colorado. And she was completely out of control and she had all of her teeth pulled for the stupidest reason that we had no scientific basis. So that is something that I really found fascinating. And I haven't had one of those dreams in a really long time. So I think it's something that my body has released, but it's just fascinating. Like, why do we have these dreams? Like, why would we have dreams about our teeth falling out? Like, how many of our ancestors, particularly those of us who have ancestors who went through immigration at that time in history, yeah, how many of us have that and we don't even know about it? So it's absolutely fascinating. And I could be wrong about that. That's pure speculation on that point. On my part, that's anecdotal. You can actually look up the cherry blossom experiment. That is fascinating. Um, okay, so talking about contraindications before we go any further. Respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular issues, history of seizures or aneurysms, pregnancy, heavy medications, severe mental disorders, or osteoporosis, which mainly just applies to core squeezes when we do breath holds, and not all the breath holds do that. And if anyone does have osteoporosis, just don't do a core squeeze. And I'll explain that. Okay, so if you have any of those contraindications, just proceed with caution. You can still do this, but it's going to be largely a down-regulating breath, which is going to be all through the nose, and we'll talk about that more in the next section. So breathing instruction. The activating breath is all through the mouth. So we're going to mainly be focusing on 2 activating breaths. Mainly going to be using one of those. So it's going to be a simple 2-part. I say simple, it's a little unusual. Like we don't breathe like this in real life. Okay. So, and pardon this might be a little strange. My setup is a little strange and I am 21 weeks pregnant, so I already have a large belly at the moment. But this is roughly what it's going to look like and the difference you're going to want to aim for deep breathing. So this is a 2-part breath. Into the belly, into the chest, then relax and let it go. So, and he gets it up to a pretty good pace. He encourages a good pace. Some of the journeys, there's a breath track in these journeys. And sometimes they sound very shallow, and it's a lot more focused on speed over depth, even though he always encourages depth over speed. So a faster version is going to look like so it does take a bit of getting used to in the beginning, but it's really not that confusing. Once you wrap your mind around it in a couple of journeys, you'll get the hang of it, and it's not that big of a deal. The other breath, there are a couple of journeys, not very often, because the euphoric, the 2-part breath is just so effective and really works on that brain chemistry. But that's just going to be so simple, in and out, into the belly and into the chest at the same time. So kind of just letting the air go where it wants to go, but the intention is to fill up all the lungs, or like all the lung space. So yeah, so anyone with contraindications, or if you want to sit through any of these for any reason, if you have like really severe back pain and it's just more comfortable for you to sit, I'd recommend breathing through your nose, although that is going to be down regulating and it will that can put you to sleep, which is something that I've experienced in pregnancy. It's like if I try to do an activating journey through the nose while I'm pregnant, it's nap time. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but if that's what you're stuck with and you really want to do this, then I'm going to recommend that you sit up and breathe through your nose for that. I actually have had someone almost fall asleep in a chair doing nasal breathing, so I really don't recommend it. Some of and we can work out some of these pains in breath work, and we can find different positions. We'll talk about that later. So, yeah. So the contraindications in particular, do breathe through the nose, but be lying down. Because if you do fall asleep, it's okay. It's totally okay. The tracks themselves are still going to work on your brain, and you're still going to get really great benefit from it. Okay, so your gas pedal, so to speak, to go deeper into this journey, to go faster into this journey, into this healing process, you're going to breathe deeper and you're going to breathe faster. So you're always going to focus on depth over speed, like we said before. Um, but if you do really want to go hard at it, then you pick up the pace. But don't gas yourself out because you can kind of you gassing yourself out usually means that you lose consciousness. You don't necessarily actually pass out. It kind of depends. And if you do pass out, it's not a big deal. Because you're on the floor already. And this is why I don't recommend sitting up with the activating breath, because if you do pass out, you're not on the floor. You're not in a safe place. Um, yeah. So so your brake pedal is nasal breathing. So if you need to pull it back, if it's feeling too intense, take a few nasal breaths. You can take just one, do a reset breath, and then come back in. You can take a few nasal breaths and just come back in when you're ready. You can also just slow down the mouth breathing. And that's what I would recommend initially. Slow down the mouth breathing, and if it's still too much, pull it back with some nasal breathing. The goal is to stay in control here. This is not hyperventilation. This is over breathing, which is still conscious, connected, and in control. Conscious, connected, controlled breathing, not out of control hyperventilation. Huge, huge difference. Okay, so I will be with you the whole time. During these journeys, I ask that you stay on camera and that you have this propped in such a way, whether you're using a laptop or a desktop, be in a position to have the camera so that I can see you if you want the support. If you don't want the support, that's fine. You'll probably still get support just by me supporting other people in the experience. But if you do want the specific support from me, please be visible on camera. And as there are more people in journeys, it will be more difficult for me to serve everyone when, like, I'm not going to see everyone when they stop breathing. And I do choose my times to interject when Brian, the man who is leading these journeys, who's on the recordings, I do choose my times. I try to not talk over him because his voice is still going to snap you out of some of that. And I'm going to be talking when he's not talking most of the time. And sometimes that's easier in some journeys than others because there's some journeys he just talks constantly, which is fine because he's really good at what he does. Okay. So with so there are breath holds and screams. The breath holds, especially if you haven't done breath work before and you haven't practiced breath holds, this can be challenging. I promise you, you are well enough oxygenated that you can hold your breath longer than you've probably ever held it in your life. You're super well oxygenated and you are going to feel like you want to breathe. And it's okay if you do. Like if it's super uncomfortable, especially as you're getting used to it, fine. Take a breath, come back to a breath hold when you're comfortable and hold it. We are going into discomfort intentionally, and you can do this. Rocking, tapping, squeezing, and by tapping, I mean emotional freedom technique. So there are pressure points, and we'll probably go over this at some point. I use this a lot in my one-on-one or even group coaching. So that these points will really help calm the nervous system. So the nervous system is going to be like screaming, like, you need to breathe, you're being suffocated. Like, no, you're not. I'm safe. You're going to be think to yourself if you need to, I'm safe, and you can tap in these spots. Oh, wrong spot. You can tap in these spots, and I will actually put out a video about tapping. It is just super useful. So, yeah. Tapping, rocking, squeezing your core if you don't have osteoporosis are all very helpful during the breath holds. They help sort of just redirect the attention, if nothing else. And the tapping specifically does help regulate the nervous system. Okay, so with the down-regulating breath or integration journeys, down-regulating journeys are integration portion of each journey, because each journey has an integration period. Because if we just like get off the ride after the last scream, it would leave us mentally fried, emotionally fried. So the integration period is very important. It's just as important as the activation period. So this is all nasal breathing. This is activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're getting back into rest and digest, and we're calming down. We're breathing in all of the goodness to replace the crud that we've released during the activation. So this is going to just be simple in and out during the integration of each journey. There's no particular technique. Usually he will guide you through a couple of some visualizations and a couple more breath holds. So there are specific instructions around that are really just lovely. These are lovely. These breath holds are much easier at this point. I don't think I might have had some issues like initially, but these sometimes the activated breath holds still feel difficult to me. But the integration portion breath holds they're just lovely. I don't think they're as long either. I've never actually timed them, but they're just lovely. You may find that your nose is really stuffed up after activation, particularly if you have become really emotional. And you can try a couple of different things. I mean, first of all, you can blow your nose, obviously. But even like pinching your nose, shaking your head, that can help. I haven't found that super helpful. Some people do find it helpful. And then there's a spot where like the bone in your nose meets cartilage. So it's gonna be slightly different for all of us. But if you press on that, it usually clears the nose almost instantly. So, I mean, like, as long as there's nothing there that actually needs to come out, as long as it's only inflammation. And sometimes you may just need to like breathe like that for the rest of it. I've had to do that through a couple of journeys, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a little distracting, but it's better than not being able to breathe. So I do have a couple of down regulation journeys, and these have integration, or they have in journey instructions in them. So I'm not going to go over those because he gives those during the journeys. It's just different count patterns. And that's really all it boils down to. It's nothing complicated. You'll lose count, and it doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so things that may come up that are completely normal. You may get cold, so have a blanket handy. Again, don't have a pillow under your head because we want the airway clear and straight. Yawning is normal. It's kind of an energetic release, and some of us are probably just really tired. And it may also just be resistance, like, I don't want to do this journey, I just want to go to sleep. Like, is this emotional, or are you just legitimately wiped out? It could be both. So tension in the body will come up. A lot of people will notice tension in their neck and their face, but it can come up everywhere. So you can rub that out, you can move it out. I really encourage you to tune in with what your body is trying to tell you. Our body actually stores thoughts. Our body is the subconscious, hence cellular memory and all of these different things that come up. So if you've ever noticed, like, you get worried about something and you get a stomach ache, it's like, oh, what's going on there? Like, is there a thought that comes to mind when you put your hand on that thought? Like, to just connect with it more. You don't even need to put your hand on it, but is there something that comes up there that you didn't think about before? I experienced that really the most vividly the first time after the one miscarriage that I have experienced. My legs were really hurting, and I tuned in with it, had a really good emotional release, and it eased up. So I don't remember the exact thoughts that were there, but there was just a lot of emotion being held there. And I didn't know to connect with specific thoughts at the time, but it was really powerful. Um, yeah. Okay. You can stay on your back for these. Most people breathe these journeys on their back. I breathed on my side. Um, Sometimes it creates a better awareness of the breath without having your hands on your torso. And it just breathing into the ribs differently creates it's just a different experience. It's kind of nice. And I have trouble lying on my back anyway. I have an injured hip from old an old car accident that it just hasn't been right for 10 years. It's not as bad as it was, but you can get into all sorts of different positions to avoid injuries or anything like that. I've even done a journey or two in child's pose, which is like upside down fetal. Well, it's a fetal position, so you're like on your elbows and knees scrunched up if you don't know what child's pose is. Otherwise, look up child's pose. I think most of us are going to know what child's pose is. And if you don't, it's fine. Just look it up. Uh, yeah, and you can rock through these. And sometimes just moving the body. You can move whatever body part you want to just get energy out. It's really supportive. Um, Whatever you do, do not stand for these. It was one of the first stories that I heard about breathwork gone wrong. There's not a whole lot that can go wrong in these journeys. The only instances of people getting hurt are people who do breath holds underwater. It's actually easier to do breath holds in very cold water. But people have passed out and drowned. So don't do that. You wouldn't be doing that anyway, because you couldn't do one of these journeys underwater unless you had really good headsets. But just don't do that. I mean, like for the breath hold, like obviously you're not going to do a whole journey underwater because we're not fish. Um, but don't stand. The other horrifying story I've heard is a instructor had people stand for an activating journey, and one guy fell flat on his face and knocked his teeth out. So not everyone is responsible. Not all facilitators are responsible. So don't just go into it. And if anyone ever tells you to do a like breath work standing up, just call them. It's a horrible idea. If you do need to get up for any reason, give yourself a moment to recalibrate. Your muscles are not going to work quite right because of the carbon dioxide being out. You're going to feel funny. You may feel really heavy. And whatever you do, do not continue the activated breathing while standing or walking. As you get more comfortable with it, you can probably tweak that a little bit, but just as a general rule, don't do it. Don't do it. So that pretty much concludes the introduction. I am so excited to see you in a journey and just walk with you on this crazy adventure. And let me know how I can continue to support you. You now can go ahead and look at starting journeys. You have a week free and to see if you want to be on this crazy journey with me. But so far, I've had no sad breathers. Well, some people are sad after a journey, but everyone likes going through the journeys themselves. So anyway, all that to say, this is lovely. It's lovely to have you here, and I can't wait to see you in a journey. Bye.